Good afternoon and welcome to the people who have joined us for our meeting today. I would like to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting today on the traditional territory of Coast Salish First Nations. I'd like to call the regular board meeting to order, and the first issue is the agenda. Mr. Berry, what's the
Yes, Mr. Chair, I
status?
believe that Director Morrison would like to add a new business item.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got an item for closed session that I believe is both emergent, unforeseen, and time sensitive, and it would be under Section 90 for land acquisition.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes? No? Okay, so the agenda as amended, moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Dory. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that. We have the minutes under M1. Are there any errors or omissions? If not, a motion to adopt. Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Marcotte. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any business arising from the minutes?
No business arising, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, we now have an opportunity for the public input period. Anyone in the gallery who would like to speak to an item on the agenda for up to 3 minutes is welcome to come forward. Oh, there we have Mr. Wilson, I believe.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for this time. Under section 9.2 of the agenda, which is increased capital project Cobble Hill Sewer by 1,200,000. That figure was originally 1.9 million. It was in the last meeting as well, and is still, as far as we know, 1.9 million. I'm wondering why why has the changes happened? I did ask the question last meeting of electoral services, and the chairman said that they would look into it. So I'm just wondering if there's been any further action on that.
Thank you. We don't answer questions during public input, but what I can guarantee you is that that question will come up when the item comes up on the agenda, and we'll attempt to have that answered. Anyone else? Seeing no one else coming forward, we can move on with the agenda. We have a delegation today, and I'm pleased to invite forward Ms. Christy Wright, United for a Pause, wanting to talk about animal welfare components.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm here today on behalf of United for a Pause.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to ask you to bend the microphone towards you a little.
There we go.
Thank you.
And I'm told I'm loud.
I would like to think determined.
I'm here today on behalf of United for a Pause. We are a newly formed organization in response to the recent cases of animal abuse in the Cowichan Valley. We are a voice for animals as well as the citizens of the community. We have over 1,200 supporters on our Facebook page who share our desire to better protect animals in the Cowichan Valley. Hundreds of citizens attended the Cowichan Cares event on March 25th to show their support for our request that the current animal control bylaw be revised to include animal welfare components. At the event, Erica Paul, Senior Animal Protection and Outreach Officer of the BC SPCA, spoke about the benefits of adopting animal care standards in a municipal, regional First Nations bylaw. These benefits include prescriptive guidelines for the treatment of animals that provide animal owners a clear direction as to what is expected of them, leaves less room for interpretation. They provide education opportunities that will change people's behaviors. They provide the ability for a bylaw officer to issue a fine on prescriptive guidelines, allowing for immediate action, resulting in less suffering. And the enforcement of animal care standards by a dedicated bylaw officer can be more frequent, creating a more humane community. Erica and Dr. John Katzman of Prevost Veterinary Clinic both spoke of the 5 freedoms that are essential for an animal's well-being. Freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from pain, injury and disease, freedom from distress, freedom from discomfort, and freedom to express behaviors that promote well-being. Currently, the Cowichan Valley Regional District has no bylaw in place to ensure animals' entitlement to those freedoms. United for a Paws and over 800 citizens who have signed our petition are requesting that the board work collectively with the BC SPCA and Coastal Animal Services to implement an animal welfare bylaw such as the one modeled by the City of Duncan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Christy? No questions at this time. So thank you and your supporters for coming in today. Hi, Brittany.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, we can move on to correspondence. Mr. Barry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have correspondence from the Honourable Alistair McGregor, Member of Parliament, Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, re National Fitness Day, June 2nd, 2018. And our MP is asking that this be declared, proclaimed that day. We have a resolution, it's in your package from a previous board resolution, that is, that we don't pass proclamations for any requests for that. However, in that instance, the policy says to place it on your agenda for information. So at the end of the day, it's still getting publicly out there that National Fitness Day is June the 2nd. So it is really just for information.
Thank you very much. We can move on then to committee and commission reports. And first up, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To avoid a whole bunch of reading and that people can follow along at home, there's going to be some of the items later in my list that I will be abbreviating to some extent. But with that said, your Electoral Area Services Committee reports and recommends from our April 18th meeting. Number one, that a grant and aid electoral area B Shawnigan Lake in the amount of $500 be provided to the South Shawnigan Volleyball Club to support growth and expansion. Two, the grant and aid electoral area B Shawnigan Lake in the amount of $500 be provided to Rotary Club of South Cowichan to support Earth Day's litter cleanup. Three, grant and aid electoral area I Yubo-Mead Creek in the amount of $550 be provided to Lake Days to support the pancake breakfast. Four, grant and aid electoral area I, Yubo-Mead Creek, in the amount of $500 be provided to the Cowichan Lady of the Lake Society to assist with expenses. Five, that a grant and aid electoral area I, Yubo-Mead Creek, in the amount of $500 to Lake Cowichan School for a bursary for a graduating student residing in electoral area I. Six, that a special event permit application from Cheetoslow Cowichan Bay to host the Dinner in White in Heckett Park on Sunday, August 12th be approved, subject to conditions of the permit being met by the applicant. Seven, that a bylaw be prepared to establish the Cobble Hill Sewer System Service Area within a portion of electoral area C, Cobble Hill, to provide for upgrades to the Twin Cedars and Cobble Hill Sewer System Services, including the Cobble Hill Wastewater Irrigation and Reuse Integration and Reuse Upgrade Project. 8.1, that a certificate of sufficiency, I love that one, confirming that a sufficient petition requesting inclusion into the Eagle Heights Sewer System Service Area be received. 8.2, that CVRD Bylaw 1926 Eagle Heights Sewer System Service Establishment Bylaw 1999 be amended to include the property described as PID 029-070-627. 3, that amendment bylaws be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings, and upon completion of an OCP exemption of PID number 029-070-627 and payment of connection fees be considered for adoption. And 4, that a restrictive covenant be registered on the property limiting any further development. Could I move those before we get into the next ones? Move those items.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Davis. Any question? No? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The next items are the ones that are available online and that they've all been printed in the agenda, and I believe are for all directors up to number 25. And I will move numbers 9, and these are all engineering utilities, so number 9 is the budget, 2018 budget for function 576. Engineering utilities be amended, and there's a number of items there up until 18. Number 10, the 2018 budget for 553 Cowichan Bay's street lighting be amended, and a number of items there. Through to, we have 556 Cobble Hill street lighting, we have 581 Sentinel Ridge, 583 Twin Cedars street lighting, 585 Arbutus Mountain Estates street lighting, 601 Satellite Park water system, 603 Douglas Hill water system, 605 Arbutus Mountain water system, 608 Fern Ridge water system, 613 Dogwood Ridge water system, 615 Arbutus Ridge water system, 616 Carlton water system, 617 Shellwood water system, 620 Massachi Lake water system, 670 Cherry Point water system, 690 Cary Village water system, 705 Arbutus Mountain drainage, 707 Lanes Road drainage, 800 Cowichan Bay sewer system, 802 Sentinel Ridge sewer system, 803 Twin Cedars sewer system, 805 Arbutus Mountain sewer system, 815 Arbutus Ridge sewer system, 820 Eagle Heights sewer system, 850 Cary Village sewer system, and I move those items.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second by Director Walker? Any question on any of these? It should be noted that I did ask Director Morrison to at least give us some brief information on this long list of numbers so that people watching would have an idea. Director Marsh?
Yeah, I just have a question, and I have to track back. It was on number 9, I think. The grant for the engineering for 2.2 million, was that what the gentleman was speaking about in the public input period? Or have I got that wrong?
Director Morrison?
Oh, 9.2,
I
I'm
believe,
sorry.
and I believe he's had a discussion with Mr. Dennison from engineering.
Right.
Okay, so this is the correct amount.
And I should remind us that he will have an opportunity to ask that question in public at the end, if he so wishes.
Okay.
So we can all hear the answer if required.
Okay.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And the following are for electoral area directors only. I went all the way through to here.
I think perhaps.
Did I miss one?
You did to 20.
I did Cary Village at 25, and then at the bottom it says electoral area directors
Right.
only. Did I miss the
Is
next
that
one?
correct, Mr.
Oh, I
Berry?
did. Yep, thank you, Director Davis.
Sorry, point of order, I completely lost.
Sure. So if you turn to your agenda page, I don't see a number on it, unfortunately, which at the very bottom of the page, it says electoral area directors only vote. If you can find that page, we are immediately above that. And just to clear with Mr. Berry, what is your understanding on how far we have voted at this point?
Mr. Chair, I would have to ask Director Morrison
We've got it clarified, thank you.
Okay.
We have additionally that there's a 2, we've got, under 25, we've got
Yeah,
To two.
the way it's printed out is
difficult to follow.
difficult to follow. Yeah.
So we're at the 2 that should, following the 2 should read that the community works, so I'll read that one out.
Okay,
That the Community Works Fund earned interest be pooled with the Community Works Fund's reserve to be made available for priority projects relating to existing Cowichan Valley Regional District infrastructure. 12, grant and aid electoral area C Cobble Hill in the amount of $1,000 provided to Francis Kelsey for 2 $500 bursaries for graduating students residing in electoral area C. 13, that a grant and aid electoral area C Cobble Hill in the amount of $1,000 to Cowichan Secondary School for, again, 2 bursaries for 2 graduating students from electoral area C. 14, grant and aid electoral area C in the amount of $2,000 provided to the South Cowichan seniors to assist with senior lunch events. 15, that a grant and aid request electoral area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $2,000 provided to the Cowichan Bay Improvement Association to support Village Cleanup Day and celebration. And 16, that Parks and Trails Division be directed to proceed with submission of a development variance permit application for the Arbutus Park washroom building. And I move those items too.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Acton. Any question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And the next two items are electoral area directors only. 17, that application number 01-E-17 DVP for Clements Road be to vary section 5.2 sub E of zoning bylaw 1840 to increase the maximum permitted area of an accessory building from 100 meters squared to 149 meters squared be approved, subject to a rock pit or similar stormwater surge retention facility of more than 1 meter squared being installed at the northern drainage outfall prior to issuance of the building permit. 18-1, that development permit application number DP18B01 on Riverside Road be approved, and 2, the general manager of land use services be authorized to permit minor revisions, and I move those two items.
Thank you. We're just going to cube that, instead of square that
Oh, okay,
water storage.
that's right.
Okay. Thank you for that. Seconded by Director Marcotte. Any question on this? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Just, I put those in, so I'm used to those. Okay. Moving on to, we have CR2, would have been the Regional Service Committee meeting. That meeting is not over. It's suspended. So,
That's exactly what I was going to say, Mr. Chair. That meeting, the recommendations will come forward, if there are any, at the next board meeting.
right.
The directors will note there are documents in front of you that should not have been distributed. That was prepared in advance, and that meeting hasn't happened yet.
So,
you're good.
the very efficient staff trying to keep up with the timing of a day like this, and unfortunately, we weren't able to complete our meeting, so
And just for
it'll change.
anybody, Mr. Chair, who's watching on the streaming, there is no CR2 report right this time.
Okay, great. We can move to staff reports. Mr. Berry.
Yes, staff reports from the Legislative Services Division regarding a proposed Records and Information Management Program bylaw. And the purpose of the report is to introduce a proposed new bylaw. It's attached later in your agenda. It's for information, and there's the background in your package, and at this point, it's just for information.
Thank you. Seeing no hands up on this one, we can move to the next staff report.
That would be a staff report from the Facilities and Transit Division regarding charging time policy for CVRD electric vehicle charging stations. Two-part recommendation that the CVRD adopt a maximum 2-hour charging limit policy and install signage advising of this limit for the publicly accessible Level 2 electric vehicle charging stations operated by the CVRD. And 2, that the CVRD adopt a maximum 30-minute charging limit policy and install signage advising of this limit for the DCFC electric vehicle charging station located at Island Savings Center.
Thank you. Moved by Director Stone. No, not moved by Director Stone. Moved by Director Acton. Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Director Stone.
So I was just challenged by the 2-hour time limit. That might be okay for people on short trips, but if you impose a 2-hour time limit on a level 2, you're only giving most electric cars about a 15 to 20% charge on today's standards. Most of them now will have the DC fast chargers, and I support that 30-minute limit. But for usefulness, I can't say that I've ever used a level 2 charger and been able to use it less than 3 hours and have it be useful. So I'm just challenged with the 2-hour time limit and wonder if there's either a specific reason that staff settled on 2 hours and not 3. 3 does tend to be the standard elsewhere.
Thank you.
So there's a question there.
Mr. Wakeham, can I invite you to the podium to see if you have an answer for that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, regarding the time limit that we proposed, we were trying to be consistent with the outlying areas. So the City of Duncan is also 2 hours. And the City of Nanaimo doesn't have a policy. Ladysmith also doesn't have a policy at this point with regard to the timeline. But 2 hours was the recommendation that we wanted to confirm with the city of Duncan. And we felt it was fair because, as Director Stone indicated, you're right, a full charge will not be done in 2 hours, but the intent was really to allow for a top-up of a charge.
Director Stone, did you want to?
Which, if I were going to Victoria, leaves me stranded. Then I can't get there with a 2-hour top-up. Right now, I stop in Shawnigan Lake and top up there. I walk down to the community, spend some time in Shawnigan Lake Village, and you know, that might be enough just to get me over the hump. But again, you know, electric vehicles are changing. This newest generation, you know, you can drive to Victoria and back on a single charge. I just think that the ones that I've seen in Nanaimo actually do have signage that says 3 hours. I don't know if that's enforced or if it's policy, but the ones in the Parkade at the Convention Center are 3 hours. Parksville is 3 hours at the beach. They just instituted that last summer before there was no limit, so it was nice to be able to charge there all day. But anyway, I would advocate for 3 hours, but if there's consistency issues with the city of Duncan, I understand it, but I
Okay.
would prefer to see 3.
Thank you. Director Acton?
Thank you, and thank you to staff for bringing this up so quickly, because I think it was the troublemakers in Shawnigan who brought up this topic.
They're
And
probably talking about me.
and I agree with Director Stone. I think 2 hours is a little too short, and perhaps it was chosen because it would get confusing with parking limitations in the city. But in those other rural areas, at least for the Shawnigan Community Center, where it kind of came from, 3 hours would be a perfect amount. Director Stone could park his car there, he could go for a little walk, have lunch, and get back in time without getting towed, because we're diligent about that there. But are we able to amend it to 3 hours? Is there any recommendation that we can do?
Certainly that is available as an option. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, please. I'll amend it to 3 hours.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Second, Director Stone. Go ahead, Director
So
Stone.
again, I just want to, you know, I defer to staff, but, you know, I would say that I support 3 hours, but if there's a reason beyond the similarities with Duncan that require it to be 2, I would rather see it be 3.
Mr. Wakeham, I kind of sensed that you were pretty flexible on this in terms of your advice.
You are correct. There is no consistency, and that was the challenge. And just to speak to Director Stone's point, regarding the city of Nanaimo, we contacted the city. There could be other private private chargers out there that might have a different timeline you're referring to, because we just called them actually yesterday, and they indicate they didn't. But our intent was to try and, I believe one of the directors had brought it up and asked us to compare it to the city of Duncan, which is mostly the local ones. That's where the 2 hour came from. But staff would be flexible with 3 if that's the committee's wishes. That's fine.
Thank you for that. Director Marsh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Wakeham. How many of these do we have, and where are they?
All the rec centers, so Kerry Park, Shawnigan Lake, Island Savings Center, Lake Cowichan, all have a level 2, which is the slower charge.
Do they just have one?
They just have the 1 unit. Bings Creek has one as well that was relocated. The one we had downstairs, it went out there.
Okay.
The Island Savings Center is the only one that has the fast charge.
So I'm just wondering, just playing devil's advocate a bit, if they're meant to charge up, I don't think anyone's going to be happy if there's only one and they stopped for a little charge up and they have to wait for 3 hours necessarily because they're on their way to Victoria. So I'd just like to hear more about that from maybe Director Stone, because I'm just wondering, then it seems like I'm thinking if I was able to go and have a top-up, I have a hybrid. If I had to wait 3 hours, that might make a big difference to me, so.
It's an interesting question. I suggest that it would even be, might be unsettling if you had to wait for 2 hours.
It might be, yeah.
Because we're used to being able to plan our routes, plan our days more directly than that. We're usually rushing. Director Stone,
As a long in the tooth EV driver now, we always plan our routes based on charger availability and locations. There's several within the Duncan area. The app on my phone tells me which ones are available and which ones are in use, and I'll go to those ones, right? So if I have to go to the, Shoppers Drug Mart there and plug in for 2 hours and then move to Island Savings Center and plug in for another 2 hours, I guess I can do that. But, you know, most of EV drivers will use the tools within their vehicles or on their smartphones, which will tell you what the charger networks are, which ones are available, et cetera. So, you know, in the end, I can make it work. You're used to being somewhat inconvenienced if you have an EV, but I can see both sides of it. So like I said, I'd prefer to see 3. I think most EV drivers would tell you that 3 is better, but if 2 is the pleasure of the board, then that's fine with me.
Thank you. I have Director Jackson and Director Kuhn.
Just want to say, there are also 2 slow ones, I believe, in the parking lot on Canada Avenue in Duncan. So, and I think there's 2 at Shoppers, is that correct, Mr. Wade? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Director Kuhn?
Do we debit Lady Smith for when he parks his car here?
Okay, I'd like to call the question on the amendment to 3 hours. All those in favor and opposed? Councillor Marsh opposed. The motion carries. On the amended motion, can I call the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Director Day, quick off the mark there. Okay, Mr. Berry.
Staff Report 3 from the Community Planning Division regarding the Shawnigan Improvement District Fire Hall Crown Land Tenure application. And there's a recommendation that the CVRD supports the Crown Land Tenure application by Shawnigan Improvement District for land occupied by the Shawnigan Lake Fire Station at 2560 West Shawnigan Lake Road.
Thank you. Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Stone. Any question on this? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I would just like to acknowledge that Chief Seymour from Cowichan Tribes has entered the building, and just wanted you to know you're welcome here. He warned me at lunchtime that he was going to come in here. Yes, thank you very much to the elders and the lunch.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I'm wondering if Chief Seymour is looking for volunteers for some committees.
He's been very vocal about that. I think he won't be shy. Okay, but Heichka for coming today, and you're very welcome here. Maybe one day, when treaty's settled, we can sit together at this board table as they do in Port Alberni. That's our ultimate goal. Okay, sorry, Mr. Berry.
Staff Report 4 from the General Manager of Corporate Services regarding the 2019 budget process and calendar. And the recommendation is that the 2019 budget process and calendar, as detailed in the General Manager Corporate Services April 13th staff report, be approved.
Director Morrison doesn't want to move this. Do I have a mover? I'll turn it over to Director Morrison first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I reviewed this a couple of days ago and was thinking about how we've gone through great strides to bring about this new budgeting cycle in which we are completing the vast majority of our heavy lifting on the budget by December 31. And I've been here a couple of terms and understand the idea that perhaps with the earlier election and a little bit of extra time that we could possibly change from what we've just gotten used to allowing for a little bit more input from the new board in the new year. But I think that there's a risk in doing that. I think that we've got a pretty good system that allows for the initiation of capital projects, immediately upon our completion of the budget at the end of the year. And I'm just going to relate back to when I was first elected. There's a lot to learn as a new director here. And given the pressures to learn all of our systems, I think that it would be wise if we were to stick to the calendar that we have all become accustomed to, and not to change it every 4 years to accommodate a group that is going to come in, and yes, they'll have some desires around the budget, but I think that for the continuity of the budgeting and the operation of this organization, that it would be appropriate for this board to do the majority of the heavy lifting towards the end of this year, keep the approval of the budget for December, and the new board can approve that unless there's something wildly out of step. And then the organization can continue on with a certain amount of certainty that makes sense. So I spoke with Mr. Keeber earlier about this. You know, we could certainly go in this direction. I just know that when I was a brand-new director, the pressures of having to learn all of the intricacies around budgeting, I think I would have been lost. So I think that I'd like to see the status quo prevail, that we do most of the heavy lifting for the 2019 budget, and that the new board will simply have that budget presented to them for adoption after the election.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Keeber and Mr. Crothers just to speak to, when you designed this schedule, what you were thinking. I'm not sure who wants to take that. Mr. Keeber?
So initially, I had presented the budget calendar as spoke as it was last year. When we brought the SMT, the idea was there'll be a new board. Maybe it'd be a good idea to delay.
It just doesn't seem to be working. To the podium. And beyond. Oh, no.
This one works. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So initially, our process was to keep the same budget calendar as it was last year. But in discussion with senior management, it was felt that the new board might find it a little bit easier if we wait to adopt the budget until after we've had a number of orientation sessions with the new board, so they'll feel better, more up to speed. So from the staff's perspective, we have no problem keeping the status quo. In fact, it would be preferred because it's hard to go back and forth.
Right.
It was just thinking about the future board.
Sure. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Crothers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can just add one more thing. So it was fairly arduous for staff to make the transition when we went from a March adoption to a December adoption, because we basically had two budget processes back to back. There was no break for staff. And so now we're back on a regular cycle. If we were to look at doing this, we would essentially be going back to that again, where we would just be wrapping up a budget and we would be starting the new one again. So that's just a consideration, that it will be a fairly significant load for staff to have two back-to-back budget processes with no break in between.
So you're
one
just backing
consideration.
up the fact that it actually
It's
for staff would
preferred
be
to keep on the
easier
cycle.
to stay on the cycle. This was just out of consideration for the new board. Okay, thank you. I'm going to let others speak, and I'll get back to you, Director Morrison. So I think I had Director Day and then Director Acton.
Well, just speaking to that it'd be easier to stick with the process that we're used to. It just, to me, just would make more sense just to give the new board, say, a one-day get-together on the budget to go through it step by step. And I think that's probably in the plan already, but just let's get all the lifting done and stick to December 31st is my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Director Acton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if there's anything incorporated here so that we get to look at the budget as a bigger picture before we set out and review certain segments of it. That's what I felt like was lacking. So if we looked at it as a bigger picture, where do we want, instead of, so that we can look at the end goal, where do we want to end up, instead of, it felt like, here's all our pieces of the pie, and then what are we at? Can anybody relate with that? So it just feels like if we could to have some conversations around if there's certain functions that we think would have a zero-based budget increase or what, just to be able to have those conversations before we set forward.
Mr. Keeber, I'm not sure you've allowed for that exactly within the schedule.
Well, to be blunt, we did not, because we used to have that a couple of years ago, and the desire was not to do that, to go to what we have now. We did, you'll recall, 2 years ago, we used to do that in July.
Right.
The individual committees and commissions would meet, and we would seek direction from the elected officials for the next year's budget.
Right.
And to be
You can be straightforward in
It
your...
the information that was provided, the direction provided was was less than adequate. And it's very early in the process in July to giving direction for 18 months later or at least 12 months down the road. So mostly it was just simply staff presenting a budget and things were just stamped and approved. There were very little direction given to be at 0 or 1 or 2 or something like that. It was tried for some regional budgets. And we're talking more regional because this board has never felt comfortable in saying Shining Lake Rec Center can't have to be 0 or Kerry Park needs to be this, or so it's more the regional ones. And so we tried to do that. But over the last number of years, we've got to what we're currently at. And that was through a process with elected officials and through a discussion at the various committees and commissions. So the idea was staff would prepare the budgets based on core only. So there's no supplemental items. Nothing would be added to that budget at this point in time. So anything supplemental to this year will be in a new request by the staff during your committee or commission, whether it's Kerry Park, whether it's Shining Lake or Island Saving, whatever the committee or commission may be, that would be supplemental to the core. So only core would go forward. And that's the other thing that my report talks about. There would be no additional items added to the budget at this point in time. So basically, 0 increase for everything, all the budgets. Now, I say 0 increases for service. However, there are increases to the budget to whether it's inflation or sometimes committees throughout the year are giving direction. I'm thinking through EAS to add more additional staff. And so that would be included, but it's additional stuff to that.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Nicholson?
Thank you. I think that we've got a cycle that's working now pretty well. I thought from a practical, workable situation, it was good this past year, much better than it had been before. And I think what we ought to be talking about now and working towards is our ability to strategically plan and then tie that to our budget. So providing an opportunity for the next board to develop their strategic priorities so that after they do that, they can tie that into the next budget cycle and make a difference, because I think that's what we never did in this term. There's the budget stuff goes on, that's sort of the basic stuff we do, and then these ideas about how we want to move the organization, but they aren't ever brought together. And so from a timing, there is a disconnect. Obviously, if you've got your new board, you want to make stuff change, but that's not the way it works. I think you have to accept that the cycle has happened and that's what's in place now, but you really need to focus on that first year is developing your strategic priorities and tying it to that next year, the following year's budget. So that's what I would like to see us think about and talk about.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Crothers, and then I'll go back to Director Davis.
So I think I may just be confirming what Director Nicholson, I think, was alluding to, in that it's with us adopting our budget in December, there isn't any way, any time practically for the new board to develop their strategic vision that could affect the 2019 budget. So I think what Director Nicholson is saying is that, you know, this board's strategic plan will live on into the new board until the new board gets their new strategic plan. And I think that's how the cycle is going to have to keep going. I think there's been a tendency with local government that as soon as a new board or a council is elected, they abandon the old plan and they start a new one. And many of the initiatives that are in your strategic plan don't end at the end of a term. They're long-term community type plans and initiatives. So I think Director Nicholson and I are on the same page with regard to how that would unfold.
Okay, thank you. Director Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just thinking back to the last time the budget was presented to us, there were some suggestions made to make some of the schedules make more sense and maybe get rid of some of the totals and sorts of things that didn't make sense. Are those going to be changed anytime soon, or is there some way we could work on those?
Mr. Keeper?
Mr. Chair, so I believe Director Davis is referring to those schedules at the front of the budget package. outgoing assistant finance manager who oversaw the budgets, had met with a number of staff and had revamped some templates and some schedules. I'm not able to answer specifically the details of what was changed, but I know there was some changes that came from the last budget session that was incorporated into that. So my hope and desire is yes, but at this point I don't know exactly which ones were changed and updated.
Thank you. Director Morrison, and perhaps you have a motion as well. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Davis.
I guess we'd be waiting for Mr. Smith's replacement, and then we could probably discuss that, and I'd be happy to have a look at what's there.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Smith's replacement, I'm hoping to be here in the beginning of July sometime. Now, the staff will be working already on the budgets. Now, we're referring to, or Director Davis is referring to the schedules. The schedules just fall out from the budget, so we have ample time at that point in time to incorporate that. We also have a new finance manager who's here with us right now. And my plan is to introduce her later on Friday, actually. And she's worked quite closely with some budget processes and streamlining some things. So for the 2020 budget, hoping to make things a little bit more easier for everybody to work with and whatnot. But she might also have some ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
So just a quick question, because it may affect the wording. Do you need from the board today a set in stone calendar, or can you go away and prepare the calendar and come back for authorization? Because it would maybe reflect how I word this.
Personally, what I would prefer, because I need to give direction to staff to start working on it, work on their budget. So my idea was, if I can get a resolution that basically
continue with
the budget calendar schedule
the current
that was previously.
Calendar that we've established.
The exact dates will slightly change based on the calendar, but the same process was last year, yes.
Director
So
Morrison.
I would then move that the 2019 budget calendar be scheduled to reflect the existing budget timelines in place.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Director Acton. Director Acton, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's kind of a follow-up for this. I'm trying to get it solidified in my mind. I guess what I'm finding would be helpful is if we had our core budget and then the supplemental kind of happened together, because it's kind of like you've ordered a sundae and then you get your sundae and you're at the table and you see somebody, oh, you have whipped cream? I didn't know I could get whipped cream. Oh, I didn't know I could get a cherry on top. And so then we're not we didn't know to order, we didn't order those things at that time because it wasn't on the radar. I guess I'd just like to have a picture of what is to come possibly and what that would look like. So that, and then it would feel like we're looking at it more as a whole, because I felt, maybe because it was my first year doing the budget thing, but I didn't feel like we were looking at it, like as a pizza. Maybe I'm still hungry, because that could be possible, Chief.
Yeah.
But, so it just didn't have all the ingredients there in front of me.
Mr. Frame? So not Mr. Frame, Mr. Kiever.
Thanks to Mr. Frank, I'm going, what?
He's my other director
Yes,
of
yes,
finance.
I know
And
Mark,
his
yes.
name is Mark as well.
Yes. Good guys as well.
Yes. Both high-class guys.
Yes. The budgets are due middle of August. Those are the core budgets. At the same time, supplementals are also due in. So the first time the budgets are presented to elected officials, you will see the supplementals as well. So the budget calendar that we adopted the last couple of years is the staff do all the work, get all the stuff, budget prepared on core, as well as a separate thing for supplemental. Beginning of October, I think the board meeting in October, the first one is the core budget is presented with the report that shows you all the supplementals.
So I believe you'll get what you want.
At the same time.
I think the important thing is the board wanted to see
Well,
the pizza with the tomato sauce on it and all the options, which you're going to have to pay for, mushrooms, tomatoes, pepperoni, as separate items. Okay. Yeah, now that's not fair. There could be pineapple lovers. Okay, I had Director Davis next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thinking back to the beginning of this term with, well, slightly different board, 4 different members, but it did take us until the budget was defeated in the first try in March, and we had a special second meeting at the end of March to do it. But hopefully the next board will be a little faster.
Thank you. So I'd like to call the question on the motion. All in favor and opposed, motion carries. Okay, so public hearings, Mr. Berry.
We have no public hearing reports. I'm just, yeah, it's just listed in the wrong spot on your agenda. There is no public hearing report, so I'll move on to bylaws.
Okay.
We have bylaw 4203, Records and Information Management Program bylaw, be granted first 3 readings.
Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Jackson. Any question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And bylaw 4203 for adoption.
Moved by Director Stone, second by Director Yanni DiNardo. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that's it for the bylaws.
Okay, and the new business item was in the closed session, so we can move right down to question period. Question period. Anyone who would like to ask a question on an item on the agenda? Seeing no one coming forward, then a motion to move into closed session. Sorry, Director Jackson?
Yeah, thank you. There was the gentleman here earlier who asked about the,
He got an answer for Mr. Dennison, and then he appears to have left, so I think.
so he's happy, okay. Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
here he is. We just, Mr. Wilson, we just entered question period.
Sorry for that. I was just asking
Yeah,
a question out
I
there.
thought you were gone, but.
Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. This is very brief. Thank you also for the explanation about the 1.2 and 1.9 million. I understand that now, and it makes sense. I've just been looking on the CVRD website for the minutes of the EASC meeting last Wednesday on the 18th. And I can't find them anywhere. And I've just been talking to a couple of staff,
Sure.
and they can't find them either. There are no minutes posted for the whole of 2018 for the EASC.
Well, let's see what we can figure out here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Blackwell, it's the responsibility of his area. He may answer the question, and I'll just try and see if they are there. I'm not responsible for posting them. Those minutes are supposed to be posted within a week and a half.
Yeah.
So it's possible that they might not have been posted yet, but certainly the past minutes of meetings should be posted.
Yeah, I can see nothing there for 2018 under that heading of minutes. The agendas are there. And the staff out there.
Director Stone?
So, but the minutes from the last ESC meeting won't be posted until they're approved at the next ESC meeting, will they? Won't they?
Mr. Chair, through to the directors, our practice is we will post the minutes as soon as we can.
Yeah.
They are
Even
dr-
before they're
even-
adopted?
They are noted as draft minutes.
Okay, just
because-
checking.
Yeah, because people want to know what happened with their development variance permit or whatever.
Yeah.
But as I say, I can't find any for
Yeah.
the whole of 2018.
We're looking to,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you should be able to
And
find
Mr. Chair, I can confirm what Mr. Wilson is saying, that the minutes have not been posted for the Electoral Area Services Committee, and I've gone right back through March here.
Yeah.
They're not there.
They're not there.
So I'm going to thank you for pointing that out, and I'm assuming that we will rectify that as soon as we can. Mr. Berry or Mr. Carruthers, there's no reason why we wouldn't have those up. So we will endeavor to get that up as soon as possible.
Great, thank you very much.
And thank you for telling us about it.
And Mr. Chair and Mr. Wilson, just for clarification as well, you're right, they're not there. They should be there. However, if you go to the agenda of a meeting,
Of the next meeting?
they contain the minutes of the previous
Meeting.
meeting.
I did go to that agenda and followed it all the way through that agenda, and there were no minutes at the bottom of that one for the 18th
So
that I could see.
So for example, I'm on the website right now, and on the March 21st EASC agenda, the minutes for March 7th are attached to that agenda.
Okay.
So that'll be one way you can get at it?
That's not the most convenient way, and that's not, but that's sort of a way, a workaround to get
Yeah,
to
well,
them.
yeah, you can understand my point of view. I'm an
Totally.
amateur, and if a heading is there which says minutes, and I can't see anything, then I don't know where else to look, and that's the simplest way I can put it.
And
Mr. Chair, I also have just been handed a note. There is a separate PDF page.
That's where I went.
It says here that they are on the PDF page.
I couldn't see them there, and I went to the PDF page.
So.
Okay.
We have to fix it.
Yeah. So we will look at it, and we will try and fix that as soon as possible.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to ask a question?
Just for your information, if you go to the CVRD website, none of the electoral area advisory planning commission meetings are available on the website.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, we can move to our closed session. Well, this is for the public. It's intended for questions for the public,
Okay,
really.
it's a procedural question.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we have to do the closed session, Mr. Barry, before we went back to electoral area services? Because there's some members of the public that came this morning for that, or regional, I should say.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do. It is
Okay.
part of this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for that question. Okay, a motion to move into camera in 5 minutes, moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.